Welcome to this special episode, Wanderers and Murderers. This is our tribute to Indigenous Peoples Day. I might have this wrong, but for a lot of people, it does seem to me as though the history of North America, and perhaps most specifically the United States, begins with colonization. In a lot of stories, in in a lot of the stories that we look at, if we don't make the effort to dig down deeper and try to find the Indigenous stories, then for the most part, these stories start with the settlers. I sometimes worry that with our interest in digging into these Indigenous stories about the land, we come across as tone deaf. And I also worry that what we're doing is a form of cultural appropriation. The truth is that it might be. The best and only judges of that would be Indigenous people themselves. For me, and I think all of us on this podcast, our truth is that the history of the land very obviously begins well before colonization. The stories of the spirits and entities that live here and how they interact with human beings begins thousands of years ago, not a few hundred. And so we do our best to highlight those old stories in a way that is honest and in a way that I hope our genuine respect shines through.
And I feel like almost as a broken record, but to almost reiterate what she's saying, I think that it's important to understand that we are a paranormal podcast, but with a heavy dose of history. It would be incomplete and inaccurate, like the history books we all grew up learning from, to claim to share the history and completely avoid or glaze over the Indigenous history. So we're left with kind of a damned if we do, damned if we don't feeling or sentiment. If we don't, we perpetuate the way Native history is largely written out of American history and education, versus if we do, we risk potentially disrespecting or insulting Natives or appropriating the culture. And truly, we come from a stance of sharing the whole truth.
I like that so much. I'm glad you said that. We stand with Indigenous peoples. In thanks and recognition for the stories, knowledge, wisdom, and cultural contributions that have been shared, we wanted to highlight Indigenous Peoples Day, some of our favorite Indigenous creators, and acknowledge the tribes of the Indigenous people who live here in Arizona.
Indigenous Peoples Day is celebrated to honor Indigenous peoples' strength, resilience, and cultural contributions, while also protesting the historical inaccuracies and harms of Columbus Day. The holiday serves as a counter-narrative to the myth of Columbus discovering the Americas, which ignores millennia of inhabited lands and the subsequent genocide and oppression Indigenous communities face. It is a day for acknowledging the painful history of colonization and for reaffirming tribal sovereignty and self-determination. I'd like to say something too. That is something that, as I've traveled around Arizona and southern Utah, I love to visit the ruins that are out there that try to show the history. Most specifically, I went to one called Pipe Springs National Monument. It's up near the north rim of the Grand Canyon. And it was very interesting to me, the kind of the history and kind of what happened to some of those tribal people there, and actually talked to a tribal person that worked there at that national monument. And it was just, it gave me a greater respect for those people and what they went through after colonization.
Why Indigenous Peoples Day is celebrated: to honor Indigenous resilience. The holiday recognizes the endurance of Indigenous peoples despite systemic oppression, violence, and forced assimilation throughout history.
To celebrate rich cultures and contributions. It highlights vibrant cultures, deep-rooted knowledge, and ongoing achievements of Indigenous communities that continue to benefit the world.
To counteract the Columbus narrative, it provides an alternate to Columbus Day, which glorifies an explorer whose arrival marked the beginning of the violent colonization and suffering of Indigenous peoples.
to advocate for justice. The day is also a platform for protest and resistance, raising awareness for ongoing struggles related to land rights, missing and murdered Indigenous women, and environmental justice. I want to take this opportunity to highlight some of our favorite Indigenous creators. A lot of these people we do follow on our Instagram. Notorious Cree, Che Jim, the Indigenous Baddie, Dene Aesthetics, Sean Klin, Shadow Productions. And then this last one, I want to say his name is Matt Mack. He's a singer, rapper, songwriter. And one song that really impacts me very deeply because it's so heartfelt and poignant, it makes me cry every time, is called Rez. And there's a few different variations of it. There's a couple of remakes and mixes with some other artists, but his initial solo of this song is so poetic and so like there's so much sadness, but there's also a lot of hope, and he talks about strength, and it's just an incredible song. We're going to have links to all of these people, but if you do nothing else, please 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 click the link for his YouTube song and listen to it and just hear what he's saying. He's talking about his personal life struggles, and he does it in a way that's just poetry. He does it, it's just beautiful. It really is. It's sad and also beautiful.
On my own behalf, I will give a Puyallup land tribe acknowledgement, which has actually become a respectful custom in the area that I am from. At events, shows, any sort of public engagement, people will often give some version of an acknowledgement to the Puyallup tribe.
I acknowledge that I am on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe. The Puyallup tribe people have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. I recognize that this land acknowledgement is just one small step toward true allyship, and I commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories of the Indigenous people of this land and beyond.
I love that so much. Oh my gosh. In kind, we also would like to acknowledge the following Indigenous tribes of Arizona and make the same commitment and acknowledge that we are on their tribal lands, which have been theirs for thousands of years. Starting off with the Akchin Indian community. In this community are the Akmel Odom, the Tohono Odom, and the Hiased Odom. The Quapaw tribe, I think that most of us probably pronounce it the Cocopa Indian tribe, but this is the Quapaw tribe. This is how they pronounce it, the river people. Next, the Colorado River Indian tribes, which include the Mojave, the Chemehueve, Hopi, and Navajo people. The Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation, which includes the Abaja, a Yavapai tribe. The Fort Mojave Indian tribe, which includes the Mojave tribe, the Pipa'aha Makav. The Gila River Indian community, Akimel Odom, Pima, and Pipash, Maricopa. The Havasupai tribe, this is the Havasubaha people, or the people of the blue-green waters. The Hopi tribe, which is the tribe of the Hopi. The Hualapai, the people of the Paultines, this is the Hualapai tribe. The Kaiba Band of Paiute Indians. Navajo Nation, the Dene. Pasquayaqui tribe. Pueblo of Zuni, the Zuni people. The Quetzaan Indian tribe. Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, which includes the Onk Akimel Odom and the Shalichidom Pipash. San Carlos Apache tribe, which is the Apache people. San Juan Southern Paiute, this is a Southern Paiute tribe. Tohono O'odham Nation. Tonto Apache tribe. The White Mountain Apache tribe, which includes the Chiricahua, the Mescalero, the Jicarilla, the Lipan, and the Kiowa Apache peoples. The Yavapai Apache Nation, which includes the Tunli, Middle Verde, Rim Rock, Camp Verde, and Clarkdale. And lastly, the Yavapai Prescott Indian tribe, which includes another tribe of the Yavapai people. We will have links to all of the tribal governments of these various Arizona tribes and the links to our favorite Indigenous content creators in the show notes. We thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
You know, I was very fascinated when I went to that Pipe Spring National Monument and learned how many different bands of Paiutes were in just northern Arizona, southwest Utah, Colorado, and Nevada. Las Vegas is named after the Las Vegas band of Paiutes.
Oh, I didn't know that. It's
Yeah.
amazing how much we don't know. Even just because
Yeah.
I just was telling Abby, I went through individually each of the websites for these tribes, and I was reading like the about and like the cultural stories of each one. I was like, holy shit, I had no idea about most of this stuff. Like what we actually know is so minimal compared to what's actually there.
If you made it to the end of this episode, we give you an especially thankful thank you. This has been a very special episode of
The
Wandering
Wandering
Crow.
Crow.